Welcome back to another episode of the Blockrunner Podcast. I'm your host, William, always here with your co-host, Iman.
What's going on, dude?
And on the sticks, we got TJ.
Hello.
And finally, after a long time, we got King, the creator of the Royals. Thank you so much for joining us, King.
Thanks, guys. It's a pleasure being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this has been a long time coming. We've been working together for a while, working on privilege authority.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of thanks in order as far as privilege authority becoming a thing, and I think it's been 4 or 5 months since the Royals project, and now it's pretty ingrained, I'd say, at least for technically from an Mscribe platform provider perspective, but also initiating the viability state of a project within the DMT space.
Sure. Because
pre-privilege authority, if you kind of can just as an introduction, introduce yourself as an artist, but then kind of explain, because you had previous ordinal projects like the Bitcoin Babbies and stuff. And then what is it you saw whenever you first were exposed to DMT? Because you identified one of the biggest elephants in the room, I guess, and kind of got us on the right pathway as far as figuring out a technical implementation to, resist those bad actors.
Sure. Yeah, I kind of miss those morning meetings with you guys, all of us testing everything. People don't realize all the work that went into it from your end as well, with the Royals. So I discovered ordinals very early on. And the reason I was so excited about ordinals as a creator was the fact that it was all on-chain. Mm-hmm. So, I'd worked in ETH, and on-chain was always where I saw there was value. The idea that people were linking to an IPFS just didn't really gel with me as something that I felt made sense in an on-chain world. Obviously, you can't do it for all art, like photographs, etc. You can't put them on-chain. But still, fundamentally, I thought on-chain is really where the future is. And, everyone talked about work being on-chain, but when you kind of scratch the surface, a lot of it wasn't. Mm-hmm. So when I saw ordinals, I was just so excited by it. And, I developed Bitcoin Babbies really early on. It was also a pretty groundbreaking project because we were the first project where the community actually minted us. Mm-hmm. So prior to that, founders were minting the projects, putting them up and then selling them later. And it kind of led to this case where either you were very well connected and knew someone who had a Bitcoin node who could do it for you, or you were already very wealthy, not likely an artist in that case, often in the space. So I really loved this idea of us doing that. So we were the first community to do that. And you could also pay in ETH at that time. You didn't actually have to have Bitcoin. We created a way where you could pay in ETH, get a Bitcoin wallet, and, you had your Babby.
Wow.
And that was the original idea around it. And, that really just set me off on a journey with Bitcoin that has been, incredibly exciting. And I think when I saw Natcats, I didn't know anything about DMT. I hadn't been in the DMT space by that. But, I saw everyone kind of posting these Natcats, and I'm fundamentally an incredibly curious person. I went off and deep dived into Natcats, and I was like, this is amazing because, you're taking that whole idea of digital art or something that exists, digitally, and you're just creating it in a way that it can't exist anywhere else. And I think, to me, pushing those boundaries are really exciting around crypto art.
Yeah. I'm curious, from your perspective, when you were looking at the Natcats and then you were first learning about DMT, what was it about DMT that really, I guess, it got your attention and got you motivated to build using that framework?
Well, there were a couple of things. One is I could see the absolute challenge of building a collection of Bitcoin data. It's so much harder to build a good collection than people think, because you're kind of restricted to something already. You've got a framework and you've got to have your art and your collection, work with that. And so Ev did this amazing job of kind of opening the box for everyone and look, you can do it this way. And, just the more you look into it, the kind of more unique and exciting it becomes.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact also that it just meant that people were inscribing JSON. So there was no big cost to the collector. That's been an ongoing issue for Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really clever. And I'd experimented actually with something along those lines before using recursion. Also, really big fan of recursion, and obviously launched a project after people to kind of show people the power of what you could do with recursion. So, it was just all those sorts of things. And then I guess when I started creating the royals,
Mm-hmm.
the true kind of beauty of DMT kind of starts exposing yourself. And I really loved, you guys will remember when we launched the royals, there was this phase where everyone had minted, but we hadn't released the art.
Mm-hmm.
And people started guessing about where traits existed and started looking to numbers and number patterns. And it just adds an element of, I think, intrigue to it that is just really fascinating.
Yeah.
It's art, it's maths, it's technology, it's code, but it's still a PFP. It's those intersection of all those things that really kind of excites me.
So yeah, during the Natcat days, there's a lot of people talking on Twitter about Natcats. I mean, it even permeated to the Ethereum ecosystem. There's a lot of like well-known Ethereum bros talking about Natcats.
Yeah.
And at the time, this was like a fair and open mint to a certain extent, where you just, if you were there at the time, you could just inscribe a Natcat for like $1.50 or whatever it was, and you just pay the mining fee. But in that time, there was also sort of an explosion of like, I guess, new mints, and it was sort of gamed, and it got really ugly really fast. And then yeah. So I'm just gonna lead up to the next question. Is like, during that time, you were seeing the same thing, and you were like, there needs to be a better distribution model. And then I think somehow either you reached out or I reached out. I don't remember, but I was like, hey, you're looking for like a better distribution model. We happen to be working on that, and we're like, hey, we need to collab so that you can come up with something cool, and then you would be the first to leverage this new technology called privilege auth. So yeah, I want to get your perspective of like the fair and open mints and how it got gamed, and like what privilege authority sort of like enabled for you and like this creativity.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I was really excited. I remember joining the Mscribe Discord, wanting to understand more about it's 6 a.m. here in the morning. All that's got croaky morning voice. So I wanted to understand about it, and I joined very quickly, and I wanted to understand how people were building these. And very quickly it became evident to me that what was, and often what happens in the space, what is a cool, innovative idea that had a lot of attention, kind of attracted, that crowd that is just there to make quick money, to do something quickly, to do something dirty. And that had happened in DMT. At the same time, I had bought a couple of Natcats. And eventually Natcats came on Magic Eden. And prior to that, I think the distribution issue hadn't really been evident to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as it did, it was very clear you had a collection that was in the hands of, very few people. And over time, that's just improved. And I think Natcats had the ability to trade its way out of that issue because they were, the original project doing this.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, I didn't believe that DMT would have a future unless we solved that. And I still believe that. We have to find a way to stop that sort of botting in the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And it's something that's I've kind of seen haunt a lot of projects, not just DMT. A lot of times creators were just chucking out work and all they were interested in is having it mint out. They weren't interested in the longer term of a project.
Right.
I had done a few projects, and one of the issues we had in Babby's actually was a free mint, and it didn't have a limit on it.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a couple of people who minted. I think some guy minted, close to 500. And they actually got out of the project very early, sold them out, but they've kept my project down for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of gave this power to people who had no interest in the long-term ability of a project, who were just there to make a quick money. And so I just felt like very strongly, like, unless we solved this,
right,
DMT, as cool as it wasn't going to be something that serious artists or serious collectors came into. And so I persisted anyway, because it was interesting enough for me to start. I'd already started building out the Royals prior to us talking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I started sharing art and talking about how I was looking to solve it. And I was thinking we could do it with parent-child inscription, I think, originally.
Right.
I wasn't aware of TAP protocol or any of those things. I think I might have connected with TAP. And then I think you sent me, a message, Will, and we started chatting about it. And, we're very much in line with what we're hoping to achieve with it. And that's how DMT Authority kind of came about.
Yeah.
Privilege Authority. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely a memorable, like, several months leading up to that launch. Cause we right there alongside with you, right. We were developing the Blockpad for like the first, PvP mint experience and stuff. And, if you guys were around during that, it was quite the roller coaster of development, so testing and such.
Privilege Authority was a new technology from TAP, and we were the first users of it just because we needed it. And then on top of that, we decided to do this PvP minting experience called Blockpad, where we wanted everybody to mint using Privilege Authority in a way where you can see each other and see who is clicking on which blocks.
Correct.
And so, I mean, we did a whole lot of like innovative stuff like in such a short amount of time. Did you know that we're more than just a YouTube channel? We also built Mscribe, the first inscription platform built from the ground up for the metaverse on Bitcoin. Connect your bitmap ordinals and use our tools to bring your community into the virtual realm. Support us by joining the movement at mscribe.io. Like, comment, and subscribe for the latest alpha. Back to the video.
Yeah, definitely kudos to you for giving us trusting in us that we would actually execute on that, because that's one hell of of an experiment.
Yeah.
Look, it was huge. And I think one of the things people struggle with as builders in this space is there's such a gap between builders and those who don't. And people don't understand what it takes to not only build, but you're building on Bitcoin. It's like archaic infrastructure, really.
Yeah.
You've got to hack so many things together to make it actually work and talk to each other.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. And I think in time people will look back and kind of see what was created and understand how kind of innovative it was. But yeah, it's certainly, I don't know about you guys, but actually I know you guys. It was an incredibly stressful week, the week
it was. Absolutely.
We were minting.
I mean, yeah, there's so much to say, because during that time, I mean, you and I were talking every single day leading up to the mint. And then, we were at the same time, we were doing like multiple launches for tests. So that's when we launched the M Crown, which was in the test net of Privilege Authority, just so that we can test the technology of the Blockpad that we're using. And that time, we were actually launching, and like there was a lot of people interested.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were doing that, and then we were making sure that the tests were going well, so that we hit our targets and everything.
Yeah.
And then in the middle of it was the Runes launch, right?
Correct.
And so we're like,
oh yeah, I forgot about the Runes. Yeah.
And so I was like, well, there's no way we can launch now because the fees are so high. So I was like, let's just wait. I was like, man, what if we have to wait for months, because Runes is like going to take over and everybody's going to be driving Lambos, right?
That was the theory.
That was the theory, yeah,
for sure.
And then sure enough, like 6 days later, it went back to like nothing.
Basically, yeah, back to normal.
Yeah. And so like finally we launched Royals, and God, no, actually, when did we drain everybody, dude? That was like M Crown, right?
That was like during like the.
Oh yeah, that was M Crown. Yeah, that was one of the tests. Yeah,
one of the first tests for sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You better explain that, Will, because you can't leave that out there without context.
That's
when
true.
did we drain everyone?
That is quite the shocking. Like it's like missing context to this whole story.
Yeah. So thankfully we were smart enough to like test our systems right before the Royals, because otherwise it would have been way worse. But so during the M Crown tests, I mean, that's the reason why M Crown exists, to get people to leverage the Blockpad mint and to test it out and, all this stuff. And so there was like, I don't know, maybe 6 tests or something like that.
There was quite a few.
Yeah. And like the second one was the one with the most activity, just because it was the second one, right? The first one had a ton of activity, and then kind of like the word spread. And then the second one, we launched the test. And we decide to launch this while we're in the live call with the community in our Discord.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so we were chatting with everybody, and they're like, yo, Will, people are getting drained. Yeah. I was like, these guys are just memeing, like, they're just screwing around. And then Iman was like, dude, something's amiss here.
Something's running amok. Yeah, for sure. And then I saw like the sweat beads like starting to drop from everybody's forehead. I was like, oh shit, dude. It's like we probably need to like red alert, sound the light the beacons.
Yeah, right.
A bolt.
Yeah. And then so I was like, okay, so like you could tell me what's happening. It's like, well, when people are submitting their transaction, all the funds are going to the miner. I was like, well, what do you mean? It's like, is it telling you that it's like you're using all the funds? Like, yeah. It's like, guys, it's like if the fee is $1,000, don't do it, right? It's not worth it. It's like, just don't do it.
Yeah, but in context of like the PvP, that's people are it's a competitive environment experience, right? So it's like I can't waste my time thinking and checking on things, dude. Like I'm trying to.
It's like $1,000, like it doesn't matter. It's like as long as I get it.
Right. So
yeah. So
it was a perfect storm, kind of, in a sense.
Yeah. So I was talking to the community. They were telling me this, and I was like, I was like, hopefully the funds are going to us because we could just return. It's like not a big deal. Well, it turns out all the fees were going to the miners.
Yeah.
Like, so you're just like maximizing like the fee rate so that you can get your mint in.
Yeah.
And it was like the system would just automatically do that.
Yep.
And so the damage was around 1.4 Bitcoin for that. And that was just like a test.
But I also think that kind of that was also a real turning point, because although it was a major fuck up, you guys really owned it. And I think, it's not often that people will do that. You did. You paid everyone back. And so I think, that created a level of trust that is hard to come by in this space too. So I think, that was also, as big a stuff up as it was, I think it landed up working in our favor. And, I often hear people say that, like, oh shit, but they returned the money. So I think, that was important. And look, not everyone would have had the ability to return that money either. Like, if money had gone out to miners, it's not like you've got that money in your wallet to send it back.
Correct.
You guys paid that out of your back pocket.
That's right. Yeah. And ultimately, like, there was a debate during that time. Like, so we took about a week just to do the math and see, exactly who spent those funds. And, so it took us a little while to like reconcile everything that happened. And that in that time, everyone was saying is that you don't need to return the funds because people willingly clicked the button and sent the funds to the fees, or to the miners, I should say. And so it technically was their fault because they weren't doing their due diligence and like understanding what they were clicking on. But we ultimately returned the funds just because like the whole aspect of the PvPs, like it was set up for like a competitive environment. And so yeah, we just decided to return the funds. And like you're saying, it's sort of, called upon the credibility of what we're doing. It's like, we're not here to, like screw anybody. We're here to like provide a service and do something interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it was a test, dude. And we found out.
Yeah.
Like, we found out real quick, and yeah, it never happened again. Right. So it's this is part of,
well, it didn't happen, but we did have the fun situation during Mint, remember, where people could mint multiple.
That's true.
So,
there were definitely other issues.
Yeah. There was a lot of bugs to discover.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's part of the experience of developing on Bitcoin. There's just so much jank and like Frankensteining things together. And especially for us, because we come from the Ethereum side, we're not like these, Bitcoin Satoshi Vision guys who they've spent years developing, like with UTXO and PSBT like systems.
Correct.
Like we've had to kind of like really quickly learn how all this kind of works in order to build out Mscribe. And so, we had a massive learning curve to kind of like work through it as quick as possible, as like, within a few months time span.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So the mint was very helpful in that respect, like, because it really lit a fire under our ass to really like figure out how everything works.
Yeah.
So that we can actually provide this primitive, right, of having a platform that can support creators specifically for DMT. Because if we don't do it, who the hell else is going to?
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, this whole mint experience is brand new. No one has ever minted in the style that we're enabling a minting to occur.
Yeah.
Right. Typically, from Ethereum to everything on Bitcoin is like, here's a button that says mint now, and then pay the fees, and then you got your whatever asset that you're buying.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like that anywhere else.
Yeah. So so you're right. I think you're right, King. Like I think like a year, 2-3 years from now, people are really going to look back, kind of like what we do now is like, NFTs kind of came and went in a sense. It's like you look back and you remember the old days of NFTs, like, Beeple's like original like launches and stuff like that, like little critical moments of history that kind of led up to like
buying pizza.
This explosion.
Yeah.
Buying what?
Buying pizza.
With NFTs?
No,
minting a royal is a bit like buying a pizza.
Yeah,
it'll be that in the future. Well, the other thing about the PvP experience that I think is also worth highlighting is the fact that prior to the royals minting, people had gotten so into the idea of these number patterns and going off and finding numbers and kind of exploring the blockchain in a way that they hadn't before.
Yeah.
And people really got on into that. I mean, people created whole sheets about their predictions, about where they were selling them on Discord. Whole groups kind of came around it. And so it kind of created this really fun treasure hunt, like old school basic treasure hunt. People really got into it. And, there were so many aspects to it that were just kind of new, but really kind of invigorated people in a new way, other than just clicking a button and you receive something. It was a stressful time, but already looking back on it, I can see it was pretty special. It, captured the space in a way that was, people don't realize was actually truly organic. There was no paid influences behind the royals. It was just you guys and me and, us sharing art and sharing what we're doing. And people really got involved in that journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most important part to showcase here is that everything that happened was like not like coordinated to any extent. It was all organic. We're just trying to make cool stuff. You're making cool art. And we're just making cool tech here. And that was it. And if you were interested, you would partake. You would be minting one of these things.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more to that. And I think that was the best part of all this.
Yeah. I think it is part of that experience of finally like discovering something new that's happening. Ordinals already has that feeling. Like anytime you're interacting with Bitcoin, like feels like it's new stuff, right? Because we're so used to, Ethereum, Solana, all these other chains, right? So just being present with Bitcoin already is like a new stepping stone, I guess, for all of us. That's how it's always felt for us. But yeah, like introducing DMT now, like you're saying, it's all like a scavenger hunt aspect of it, getting as close as you can to the data layer. It's just part of why we wanted to build out this experience, right? So you feel like a tangible connection to the blocks themselves. Right?
Yeah.
Even when you're looking through the field of which ones actually pertain to a specific collection.
Yeah.
Like each one has its individual uniqueness, right? In the data set. And you need to become familiarized with that because typically in the past, the data has been basically of no use.
For sure. Yeah.
So yeah, that is like the new breakthrough, I think. So if you can just kind of like go into a little bit about like now that, you have this successful community, this launch and everything, like what is it that's now in your mental like prioritization? Like as far as like, how do you what are your responsibilities as like a founder, a creator, just in general, right? And then, pushing this this ethos forward.
Yeah. So look, I think my views on a creator founder have become cemented over the time I've kind of stayed in the space. So fundamentally, I think Will, you and I have said, look, once you've minted, the roadmap is delivered. And I do think that too often in, the Web3, it sounds like an old word these days already. It feels outdated, but whatever this new thing we're doing is called, the idea that someone buys something and then waits for someone else to do something just feels not true to the ethos of crypto and Bitcoin and anything. And that idea that a community really owns the responsibility to take that art forward, I feel very strongly about. And I feel like it's really held the potential of the space back. And I think some of that comes from ETH, and some of that comes from the fact that you had a lot of people launching stuff and saying, buy this and you will get the keys to the city, or, some stupid things that were being promised. But the value of what we're creating has to be in that thing. That thing has to stand on its own feet as being of value. Now, I will always bring, and I always have brought my collectors along on a journey with anything new I create. But what that community comes, I will be a part of, but it's not up to me to create it from there on in. It's not up to me to, say, this is what we're doing, this is what I'm promising you. Over and over again, we have seen that fundamentally being the reason why communities have failed. You look at the really strong communities, it's where the community has come to the forefront and really kind of owned what they are and become involved. And I'm really incredibly lucky from very early on. I had very solid people who got involved with things. There was a period last year where I was very ill, and I had people within my community step up and say, we don't want this to die because King's not here, we're going to just take over. And they have fundamentally driven like babbies forward. People have done the same with Punk Ape, and now with the Royals. So I do think that's a really important thing that we have to keep drumming on about, because until people actually get that, I think a lot of what we're creating will die off. It will die off. And you're doing that in a space where people are completely always looking for the new shiny and to make a quick buck and to do something, people just want to make money. And that's fine. Bitcoin is a casino. But, we've got to think longer term about the value we're creating. We are at the precipice of what is a new art movement, a new type of art. And I love that DMT takes that art concept of, art on chain and takes it in even further and ties it to the data. To me, it's really important that art fundamentally that we create on crypto cannot always be replicated outside of it. To me, that makes it truly something unique. So DMT ties into a lot of those series that I talk about and that I hold personally. So I don't know if that's a very roundabout way of answering your question, Will, but basically community is very important, I think, to take these things forward.
Yeah, I have a lot to say. I mean, I feel like the whole NFT mania, I think the numbers brought in like around $60 billion like in a year of like just like trading activity for NFTs.
Yeah, in 2021, I think.
Yeah. And a lot of that also brought in a group of people who just thought that if I just mint a picture, that number will go up and then I make a ton of money and that was it. And so a lot of that perception was that I don't have to do any work. I just like buy this thing and all of a sudden I'll be rich. And that's not really how crypto works, right? There's effort that needs to be done by the community for something to maintain its value. So I totally agree. But from your perspective as an artist, what does like DMT mean in the context of like we have NFT projects, 10K projects, like these like static, projects that exist on Ethereum and other blockchains, and anytime that the artist decides to expand, it's typically met with like vitriol and a lot of hate, and like you're diluting this and that. But with DMT, it's like you're essentially picking an element, which is a pattern on Bitcoin, and that pattern could occur again in the future, and that means that your art non-arbitrarily expands. So what does that do to you as a creator in terms of like, the effort it takes to like design a project based off these parameters?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's huge. You have to really think of what the future is going to look like. Have you built enough things to make it possible it can exist in the future? You have to design. So the Royals is built on P5JS, and I guess that significance is not important to a lot of people, but it's also lost on a lot of people. P5JS is really created to create most of what we see as of generative art. But I wanted to create it in P5JS because you have so much more control over what you're creating. But it's also much more challenging because you're not just, if you're not just using SVG shapes and putting them together, you've got to kind of think about how the code's going to interact with each other every single way and in ways that you might never have thought of. I remember when I was testing, I accidentally created like an alien clown. Mm-hmm. And of course, the aliens have a different shaped nose. The clown didn't. So I had to kind of make sure that the code accounted for every possibility that could occur, mm-hmm. which, is pretty massive to kind of do. So you are thinking about the kind of future. But the one thing about privilege authority that I think I didn't really appreciate at the time we created it and that I appreciate now is it actually gives the Royals community the power to decide whether we mint the extra ones or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we might actually decide as a community we don't want to mint the extra ones, and we don't have to because they're not just automatically going to be spawned out into, the blockchain for everyone to mint. So, I'm totally up to the community to come up to that decision. Personally, I think it's exciting. I think it would be incredible to do that. But, ultimately, that's not my decision to make. Privilege authority means that they won't just be deployed out there into the ecosystem.
Yeah, you bring out some interesting, realizations as far as, community involvement with these types of decisions, right? And it's something we've been really thinking in depth about because
a lot.
Yeah, because out of the nature of what it is you just described, right? These are considerations of the future that aren't 100% in your control. And then, there's a community here that obviously has shared interest in the future outcome. So there's consensus necessities here. So it's really difficult to achieve these things on existing frameworks I don't know, Discord or Twitter or whatever. You basically can't do it. You can have an idea of what everybody kind of wants, but you need a formalized structure of how to actually do this from the protocol layer, I guess. Mm-hmm. Right. So these are things that we've been internally trying to address and work towards to support, again, creators like yourself and to make these ecosystems actually sustainable indefinitely into the future, right? Because Bitcoin's going to outlive us, like Will likes to say. These DMT assets will outlive their founders, like yourself, right? So these communities are going to continue to expand and grow over time. So there needs to be a little bit more structure in place to facilitate these types of decisions, right? So I'm curious.
Well, I think, Will, the way the way I've always spoken about it, in terms of an analogy, and I've stolen this from a book title. I've actually met the author for it. Is we want to create starfishes, not spiders. And so the theory behind that is if you create a spider, that's a leader-led organization. You kill a spider, it's gone, it's dead. But a starfish, you cut off a leg and it still keeps growing and it still keeps going. And it's an organism that doesn't rely on a central kind of authority to be its strength.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to create in with ordinals. And to be honest, fundamentally, it's the theory behind crypto. We should all be embracing that. We're all here participating in this ecosystem. More people should actually understand some of the philosophy behind it. It's not just about getting rich. I mean, that would be nice too, but there's a lot more to this when you kind of scratch the surface.
Yeah, I totally agree. One of the biggest things we want to see is actual value being produced from crypto, right? We talk about this all the time. When are we going to actually have killer apps where people I guess, are like benefiting from that in a sense from crypto. It's not just these casino mechanisms. They do a good job of galvanizing human beings, liquidity, stuff like this into like a single initiative, right? But it typically ends up in sort of like vapor result. So therefore, like nothing of value was actually produced other than, this game of hot potato, right? Whoever gets in early, they've produced some value for themselves, but then the people who got in late, they've lost some value. It's a zero-sum game, right? But like, why can't we figure out an actual how to harness this superpower of community organization and such to produce something of tangible value, right? So the idea of like, when you're describing the responsibility of a founder and such, it's like we're trying to identify this thing that we're all collectively aligned, and we need to like identify the purpose of like growing this thing into the future where everybody feels like a shared responsibility to do that, right? You feel maybe the biggest issue is maybe it's an issue of scale. It's just not big enough potentially. Like the existing communities, maybe they need to be a little bit bigger in order for these like natural incentives that actually kind of like play in to where there is this shared alignment. Or do you think maybe it's something else? It's a culture issue. Like, what do you think? Like, how come you haven't seen these OG NFT collections really like go anywhere? You know what I mean?
Well, I think the OG NFT community was incredibly innovative, and we haven't actually seen some of that innovation on Bitcoin yet. Like if you look at some of the early NFT projects, they were incredibly creative. People were doing amazing stuff. And I think so many people got burnt out by what happened afterwards. A lot of people left or don't want to engage anymore. And I actually think that's held ordinals back, like some of that hangover, that history. I do really believe that what we need to see more of on Bitcoin is some of that that true artwork. I think someone shared an image the other day I retweeted on Twitter, which is, the collections on ETH with staying power, all kind of art collections, and you compare that to Bitcoin, and we're still on the PFP phase and all of that. And I kind of feel they have value, but we need to push things further. And one of the things I'm working on in DMT actually is around that. I really think generative art has massive potential on as DMT. In fact, in my mind, if DMT is kind of suited for anything, it's generative art, and you could do it so beautifully. It's like a visual representation of the data on Bitcoin. Yes. One of the issues holding DMT up, obviously, is that a lot of places like Magic Eden and a lot of the marketplaces aren't supporting it visually. So even if you create a beautiful moving artwork like MDV did with his collection, you can't fully experience it on a marketplace. And often that's where people are only going to look. They're not looking outside those ecosystems. But even if Magic Eden doing it, they're not displaying the art in a way that is purpose-built for art. So, we're working on at the Royals on a solution for that. We want art to be displayed in a way that is, allows people to experience it fully, but also we're creating a way to encourage more generative artists to become involved in DMT. And, really kind of working with them to help them understand it, because that's often a barrier for them. They just don't understand it enough. It's too technical. So break it down for them so that they're able to create these kind of beautiful generative art collections. And I do really think that art collector sector of this whole space is really important to legitimizing what's happening here in the future. I think without it, it's going to be hard to convince people that this is real art innovation. We need to kind of rely on them to have those conversations within their ecosystems around, crypto art and digital art. And there's definitely growing awareness. You don't go into an art gallery anywhere these days and not experience digital art to some degree. But this is actually, so much more than that. It's digital art on the blockchain. And I still fundamentally believe that that whole idea that digital art can be traded in a way that assigns ownership, it's such a simple concept, but it's also a really important one. and, for creators, because then they could sell their work digitally. So, that whole right-click save kind of joke is still very important, because NFTs, at least in the original form, did allow for people to trade digital art in a way that legitimized it. And it's simple, but I do think it's important.
Right. I'm curious, like, the work that you're doing, like you obviously have to interface with your family, and they have to ask you, is like, what is it that you're working on? Like, how would you explain DMT to somebody? Like, what do you say?
I just say, look, it's just really nerdy.
Yeah,
I do explain it too. One of the things, I have been fully anonymous, and that's been very important to me. Fundamentally, it was something about crypto I really valued in the beginning. So a few people in my life kind of know that I operate in this space. And I do talk about it. I do see people's eyes kind of glaze over, but often there are a lot of people who are like genuinely interested. I actually just this weekend had a conversation with someone who is a curator at a very world-renowned gallery. Not anything to do with anything digital. And I was talking through them and showing them generative art and showing them, all these sorts of things. And I could genuinely see them get excited. And then I was explaining how DMT takes that even further and ties it into the, blockchain data. And you can go even deeper on those things and explain to them how, that limits things as a creator, but that actually becomes a challenge. And people do get it within their different interest fields. So it's just finding the ways that people can connect with it. But I
totally agree.
Personally, I find it exciting.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, Iman and I, we're more like science, like backed historical like people, and so we like to use science-based like thinking to like explain stuff. And like our natural like response to like explaining DMT, it's like thermodynamics, or it's like something, a parallel that we can kind of attach to like physical reality.
Yeah.
And so that's what we use, but it doesn't tend to resonate with probably the majority of people.
I try my best to try and describe Bitcoin as like a living organism now, to contextualize like what it's happening, right? So like how does life actually how does the result of life occur, like in our physical reality? Yeah, there's many different like composable steps to get to that level of complexity.
Yeah, cells have motors apparently.
Right, but they start off even more primitive than that.
They do.
It's like they're in their elemental state. So you're completely right by saying this is some nerdy shit.
It's so nerdy. It's so nerdy. And look, not everyone's going to get excited about it, but that's okay. Like, find the people who resonate with it and, keep spreading the word. We don't need everyone. This idea, that we needed everyone to understand crypto and we needed everyone on board, bring on the masses. I actually don't agree with that right now. I think I used to think that's what we needed. We just need to keep, those of us who see the long-term vision, just keep your building. The casino around it, the fast cash people, they're important because they keep liquidity in the market. They're still necessary. Mm-hmm. But, I kind of see that this world will become, something a lot like vinyl collectors. It's got a massive market still, but people are so into it who are into it and they collect things. And look, people are naturally collectors. They find something they like and they collect things. So I think, that's just going to be kind of, where we kind of land up. Do we need everyone to love ordinals? I don't think we do. We just need the people that love it and see its value to continue kind of talking about it and being excited by it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we feel the same thing. That is the energy that attracted us in the first place, because at the time we discovered ordinals, I'd say we were like at our lowest state, like from a
crypto sentiment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, this is like post collapse of everything essentially. And
banks and FTX and
yeah, pretty much. So we're like, man, we really need that inspirational spark to like reemerge at some point, right? What's it going to be? Is it going to be in the metaverse? Is it going to be in DeFi? Like something, right? And then we caught wind of ordinals at like an Ethereum conference, as ironic as that is.
Yeah.
And it was like this is it. right? This has some new vector of potential. Like, again, bringing everything to Bitcoin. All of a sudden, I'm interested in Bitcoin, which I originally was not.
Fool.
Right. But assume others are going to feel that same resonance that I do, right? And we all do. So at some point like this, there's going to be a light switch, I think, mass awareness events. I don't know. Hopefully that's why we're working so hard. Hopefully DMT is like another layer of like inspirational, like dissemination, like that's originated from ordinals, right?
Yeah.
And taking it to another step of like of purpose and interest to people. So like get out of this destitute state of like, man, like everything in crypto is a scam. Everything is just unoriginal. Everything's a carbon copy of each other, right? There's actually something new happening here, something with some poetic beauty, if you can interpret it as such, and get past like the wall of nerd and like try and feel what's happening here, right? So people, artists like yourself, are critical in that. And we if there's any artists watching, I was like, we need more of that. If you actually have like a tangible respect for what Bitcoin is,
yeah,
and for what art can do, like for us as human beings, like there's no more better perfect marriage than like participating in this new ecosystem, right?
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
People forget that nerds have built everything that we have, by the way.
Yeah.
Revenge of the Nerds.
Oh, look, I am a total nerd. Don't get me wrong. I am too. And, you know, I think the other thing that I've really come to kind of value is, you know, I think everyone had that low point where you were like, fuck, everyone around me is a scammer. And that's where my community really, like watching people really come in behind me and really believe in me and know that, you know, I was someone they could trust.
Yeah.
That's been really important, and something I've never taken for granted. You know, they are, without people like that, I wouldn't, you know, have continued. But also I think the thing that's kind of interesting about DMT, and I found this when I moved from ETH to Bitcoin, is Bitcoin was much more supportive. People were very supportive. People were willing to be trying new things. But there was still a bit of the ETH noise around things. And with DMT, you know, people don't appreciate how much collaboration there is, basically because we're all building out something new. And those, you know, original kind of founders like EV, VDV, you guys, everyone is very supportive of each other in a way that, you know, I really, really value.
Yeah, you know what?
And, you know,
I'll just you know, chime in and say it's important. It's this framework sort of is aligned with everybody, like in the sense that if the creators use this framework, we're all incentivized to kind of support each other, right? Because you can use the block data independently of DMT and just like create something.
Yeah.
Right. You could do that,
Yeah.
but it's like it's an island. Like it's, yeah, you're still using DMT or you're still using block data and Bitcoin and all that stuff, but there's no network effect when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of value when you're kind of like leveraging this framework because you're part of a network now where anyone who does well on DMT, it sort of the water rises for everybody. All the boats rise.
Correct.
And so that's the weird thing that's not easy to understand about why DMT. Like that is an important factor that is like, it's not tangible, right? And so like when Royals does well, Natcats does well, like all the DMT boats start to rise and they get noticed, and it becomes that network effect that sort of grows.
Correct.
And so that's why it feels more collaborative in that sense than just like, you know, picking some data on Bitcoin and just like doing some project where you're sort of by yourself.
Yeah. And it seems to have attracted people with a very similar ethos. I think, you know, when we started speaking, it was very quickly that we were kind of aligned in how we think about Bitcoin and where we want the space to go. And the same with, you know, EV. So I think it's attracting this kind of really solid bunch of builders that I think, you know, we here to set the scene. And even I know from my collectors and leaders in my community are very aligned with that sort of thinking and that long-term thinking and that belief in value, in not wanting to do things that are quick and dirty. And so I think that's a really important kind of foundation for us to build on. And that all happened organically. I think the power of things happening just naturally and organically is often undervalued. But to me, that is where, you will build real strength.
Yeah, and that's where you're gonna find like actual like entertainment value, right? When not necessarily when it's like pumped by everybody. There's like retweet campaigns all over the place for like some random picture project. Like there's no value in anything like that, just because it has such a like large exposure where the upside isn't as high as it could be, right? And so when you're building on like substance, like something like DMT, like you're building value on top of a foundation of value. And so I think that adds to the narrative, and it adds to the creativity potential of any creator looking to build in this space. And then on top of that, the fact that this is like something new and it can only be done on Bitcoin, like it just adds more to like the value proposition that a creator would bring when doing art and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely been an interesting journey so far. We're definitely not done. Even you and I, we're collaborating on a new project that's relatively large, and there's more artists involved in this large thing.
You're using the wrong word.
Large, mysterious thing. Look, so many people are asking me about it, so we better announce something soon.
Yeah, we definitely will. Man, we're like in this weird like mental limbo of like how do we introduce this? Because from our perspective, it's just there's so many gravitational like vectors of interest here, because we're trying to prove a lot of things and introduce a lot of new, I don't know, like disruptive forces potentially. Right?
You're doing what the block runners do, guys. You guys always do this. But I think people will be excited. I think it is interesting, and I think people will be curious about what it is, but they'll be drawn to the things that excite them in the full narrative. And everyone doesn't have to understand anything. I have a lot of my people in my community who say, look, DMT is kind of beyond me, but I like the art. That's okay. Like you don't have to understand everything. You just have to like one aspect of it and believe in that.
Yeah, I mean, DMT is sort of like back-end infrastructure. I mean, if you're into the nerd stuff, that you would be interested in DMT, but you don't necessarily need to understand it to really appreciate the art, right? I really like the royals for the way that they look, independent of like, how it's formed.
Same. It's my current PFP. The alien royal is beautiful. Yeah. It's great. I identify with it.
That was a lot of sleepless nights dreaming about the royals, trust me.
Yeah.
They were just like my life for 3 months.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it takes a ton of work, and I know how much work it takes just because I was on the calls with you about it, and so I know it takes a lot of effort. And like from like a surface view, it may appear that it's not that much effort, but it's once you get into the details of it, you start to appreciate it a little bit more. And I think that's like the essence of DMT is like once you start looking into it, it's like, holy shit, there's like we have digital physics now.
Yeah, I think this is why God has like chosen us to like go down this path out of like, because previously we didn't have the context of that appreciation for like the artistic process itself.
Yeah, that's so true.
We didn't, because we're these like tech nerds, right? It's like we can't even make stick figures, but we can.
Look, it was huge, and I think there's a whole another hour in the art, creating the art for the royals and where that came from and kind of the challenges around that. But I probably bore everyone but 3 people. But it was incredibly challenging, but for me such a period of growth, like and that's what I love. That's what I want to do with every project I take. Like you don't want to do something you want to do something you don't know, that's new, that's challenging, that's adding to your skill set too, that's pushing your community forward. And the royals definitely did that to me. I'm really proud of the art. I know that it's very distinct. It achieved everything I set out to do. And, as an artist, to have that sense of satisfaction in your art is actually very rare.
Yeah.
So, I'm very proud of them. And I'm very, grateful to both of you for giving me the opportunity to kind of create them in the way we did.
No, thank you to you, King, for trusting us. I mean, it was quite the journey to get to where we're at today. And
Yeah.
You really had to believe in us, and like that we were able to achieve what we did, right? So credit to you for all that, and ultimately, you know, we are collaborating on a pretty big project here, and you know, we do want to have you come back on and kind of discuss like this bigger project, just because
We have to.
it's
There's so
big
much to talk about.
It is it is big, where you can't overstate how big it is, because it's almost like a new framework. It's almost as if like it's like a guide for others to like really take hold and, you know, create their own, you know, image of like this larger project, and the fact that it's supposed to last for as long as Bitcoin. There's like technical mechanisms to achieve that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we're going to be talking about later.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I want to ask you is like, where do you go from here? Are we going to see you more on Twitter Spaces? You know, are you going to be more available, like, you know, on these like Twitter Spaces and things like that?
Well, yeah, I look, you know, as I said, I've been completely anonymous up to date. And that's something, you know, fundamentally I've always believed in as being a right you have on crypto. But in a lot of ways, it's also held back, you know, my community often. And the reason is because I haven't gone on spaces, you know, I haven't done podcasts. And I think, you know, it's gotten to the point where I owe that to my community. So I think, you know, that's something I will be doing more of. And obviously, as you guys know, I have a lot of opinions. I have a lot of deep thoughts on these things. So, you know, I would like to share those and become more involved in that aspect, you know, of things.
Okay, great, because we're gonna need your backup on this like large thing.
Absolutely.
And
this big project. Yeah. I'm there. Look, it's honestly, it's been like a next level unlock in the way that the Royals was. It's like, wow, you have to rethink how you create things. You have to, you know, when we tell everyone what it is, they'll kind of they'll understand these kind of challenges. But you have to, yeah, it's just a new way of thinking about creating a collection.
Yes.
That is such a massive challenge. For me personally, one of the things, you know, I've gone back to look at is some of the very early projects like autoglyphs or maths castles which are super nerdy collections on ETH, but like go back to those fundamentals and kind of look at them and use them as inspiration to build out from there. So I'm really excited by it.
Yeah.
But I'd say it's certainly the most challenging thing I've personally done.
Oh yeah. We're starting to see exactly how challenging it is, like on the creator side, for this like larger thing. So we totally understand like the amount of effort it takes for any artist to create anything.
Correct.
And it's definitely so much effort. All right, so we're in the final minutes, King. Any final words? Any takeaways? Any like last things that you want to kind of mention before we jump off?
No, I think we've covered a lot. You know, I'm happy to continue on spaces, chat to people about, you know, anything. I think, you know, I'm pretty open. Being on spaces is just about, you know, sharing more of my knowledge, I think. But no, can't think of any final thoughts. Any final thoughts from you, Will?
What do you say, Iman?
Just that we're gonna be there, right there with you, because the Twitter Space thing is kind of new to us too, I guess, but it's like a necessary part of like nurturing, I guess, everything, because that is where like the people are present. I mean, you know, Elon spent a lot of money on that platform for a reason, right? It is kind of like the world's like meeting point.
Yeah, we have to make sure Elon gets his money's worth.
Right. So yeah, any discussions that organically arise from within these Twitter Spaces or not, you know, we're gonna be right there with you, you know, because we're aligned in like our understanding and our belief that, you know, what we're working on has like substance to it, right? And we're, you know, we want more people to kind of like, you know, understand that and be motivated and potentially, you know, be inspired by what it is you create. And I guess now, like what it is we are creating, you know, so that's something interesting, right?
Yeah, for
and
sure.
Yeah, we gotta talk our stuff, right? And you have a very impactful voice, right? That's something I've observed since the beginning, since I've been introduced to you on Twitter, and people respect you, and then you say things that resonate, right? It's not easy to do that.
Yeah.
Right. To actually like leverage a platform like Twitter to its ability where you can really like build an army in a sense. And I feel like the Royals community is exactly that. So yeah, I'm just excited to kind of keep moving forward.
Yeah. All right, King.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah. So all the links for all the listeners will be in the description. King, thank you so much for joining us. We're definitely going to have you back on to talk about like these larger things that are happening in the background. And thank you so much for trusting in us, and happy to kind of be on this journey with you. And for everyone, I appreciate you guys for watching, and we will catch you in the next podcast. Peace.